All right, it is 7 o'clock and we are going to get started here. Thank you for joining. Myself and Eric Kloss will be your host and guest today. I'm super excited about that. We're going to be talking about that phrase that on our podcast and our leadership mentoring call. This call here, the most important person you'll lead is yourself. So just real quick here, if you haven't already, go out there to YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or Google Play, whatever your device is. Download our podcast that Eric Kloss is the host of. Also, we've got some shorts of the mentoring call. These calls here on YouTube. If you have trouble searching, just search for Tips of Leadership. We hope that you will subscribe if you hadn't already. Today's guest needs no introduction. I think everybody probably knows Eric. Eric is a student of leadership like myself. He's a great friend of mine, and again, also the host of our other podcast. As we go through this today, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. We want to definitely answer those at the end and make sure that we get you the information that you came here for. So, Eric, let's get started.
Bill, I'm excited to be
Morning.
here. Thank you.
I'm excited too as well. Gosh, this call we were thinking if we had 45 minutes or an hour, we could probably fill it up, but we don't have but like 20 minutes and to give time for questions. So let's just dive right in there. So Eric, we talk about this phrase on every podcast that you do and every leadership mentoring call that I do. And the phrase is the most important person you'll ever lead is yourself. And there's just a lot to unpack into that. So, Eric, what does that mean to you? Why do you say that? And what can you give the leaders here or those that are aspiring leaders takeaways from that very phrase? The most important person you ever lead is yourself.
Yeah, Phil, well, I appreciate it. Truly, I'm honored to be, on the coaching call with you. And for everybody that's joining, we appreciate you joining us so early, and we value you all make a difference. I'll tell you, I'm so inspired about our industry right now with, everybody kind of developing into, personal growth and leadership. To answer your question, Phil, this really has been a phrase, not just saying it, but really living it from, my post-traumatic stress experience that happened years ago, that nearly cost me my life. And um, because that was so hard, and I realized that I had to fight every single day, and it started with me. That's really where it started to evolve. And then it kind of went into a next layer of leadership. And then when I really kind of got immersed into leadership, there's all these theories out there, and we need to do this, and this is how you need to handle this situation. And there was really a gap that was missing between the individual. Like, we can learn all these things, but we can have a great exterior persona in leadership, and then we go home and then our life is a disaster. And so that's kind of really where it started marinating, Phil. And you and I were doing a session, it was last year, and we were teaching about this concept. And during a break, a guy came up to me in the hallway, and I had made a comment. And quite honestly, I didn't even remember what I said. And he says, your comment in that first part really shook me. And I said, well, tell me what it was. And he said, you made the comment, and I do remember it when he said that. He says, I said that if you don't get this right, leading yourself, then nothing else matters. And that's true. That's true. Every day is a fight for me, getting up, doing the right things, following through, like all of these struggles that, people appear to have everything in line. It's a struggle for me. And I'm vulnerable enough or transparent enough to say that this leading yourself is very, very difficult. And so that's a little background, Phil, about, what that statement means to me.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good place to kind of plug in. Your second book is coming out, released this week. For those who may not be aware, Eric has released a book a few years ago about stress, and obviously did a lot of presentations, spoke nationally. And then now this week, your second book is now released, And you'll have a copy or copies of that book at the upcoming TIMSA conference. Obviously, if you're not coming to that, Eric can get you a copy of that if you desire. Eric, you want to just kind of plug in a real quick something about the book here before we move on?
Yeah, sure, Phil. Thank you. It's called On the Other Side of Post-Traumatic Stress, and it has the original writings plus life after post-traumatic stress. There's some leadership stuff in there. It's a it was a very difficult year to write that, and so there's a lot of principles of that I think will add a lot of value to everybody. So certainly looking forward to getting that out to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. You know, Eric, you talked about these struggles, being, in post-traumatic stress and leaders and getting up every day and following through and we as leaders know that there are a couple of things that every day must be. A, you must get up and follow through. And B, there has to be results. If you don't follow through and come up with results, whatever the situation is, because we talk about this in our class, as leaders, we're paid or we're, our role, part of our role is to problem solve. And problem solve could be a lot of things. And at the end of that, there has to be results. And, sometimes, Eric, we have what I call self-limiting beliefs. And we all have those. There's nobody in this world that is not exempt from self-limiting beliefs. And one of the biggest things is just confidence, right? I mean, we all suffer from some sort of level of confidence. You either have, lack of confidence, and many times we might have too much confidence, and we're going to get into that in just a little bit in this call, egos and pride and things like that. But some of the most probably the things that most of us have or many have as you are maybe a young leader and trying to get into leadership is, I don't know how to be a leader. That's a self-limiting belief right there. I can't be a leader. I don't know how to be a leader. Somebody's going to judge me. I'm going to be in charge of people and people are going to be pointing their fingers at me. They're going to be judging me. That whole perception thing there. There's many other categories that we could fall into this, but it really comes down to one of the most limiting beliefs that people hold is that others' opinions about them are more important than their own.
Yeah.
And we as leaders, it's important to ask for evaluation.
Yeah.
It is important because we grow in that way, in that respect.
Mhm.
But self-limiting beliefs, confidence, I will tell you, people probably on this call that know me well will probably say, I don't see that in you. But there was a time whenever I didn't have confidence.
Yeah.
I was really kind of more introverted versus very extroverted like I am now. You can transform, but you just have to definitely say to yourself, hey, I don't know everything. I don't know everything. I'm going to fail and I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to have these self-limiting beliefs, but I got to have help to get up every day, follow through, and get those results. So, Eric, self-limiting beliefs. Do you have any of those? You suffer from any of those?
Yeah, I do feel this imposter syndrome for those that are not, familiar with that. You kind of question whether you're qualified to do certain things. This has been something that I've battled, my whole career. I'm more comfortable now within that space, but yeah, imposter syndrome, insecurities, years ago. And, I know why insecurities were just such a hard thing for me, but it is the self-limiting beliefs. I'm an avid reader and love different books. I'm reading some biographies right now, and one of it is a musician, a very popular musician, and he talks about every time he gets on stage, he is scared to death. And every time that we speak, doing this call, doing a podcast, teaching in front of people, I still am nervous and feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail today. So I think we need to be comfortable with that. But I also think, Phil, we as leaders, we need to share with people that although they judge us and they see us perform in certain ways, we still struggle with that. So
Mhm.
I think it's a normal thing that leaders have to face with. I've been in several meetings where I've walked in and I'm like, wow, I am in way over my head. So it's a normal part. So I think we all need to understand that it's real, it exists, everybody deals with it. And then it starts to kind of, you know, be in its place where it's not debilitating, but you can kind of use it for energy and use that as an, oh man, here we go again. I'm just going to walk in confidence. But yeah, I definitely struggle with it.
Yeah, well, you made mention there. You walk into meetings, you're well over your head. As leaders, if we want to be better, we've got to manage ourselves up. I mean, if you take the sports, whatever sports if you want to play sports well, or if you have a team, you want to manage them up, right? You want to put them up against folks who are better. So we as leaders need to surround ourselves with an inner circle of people who challenge us, but not only challenge us, also keep us accountable, and that helps us to stay in the right lanes and not get way out into the forest and in the middle of the ocean and so forth. So that's really good input there. Something else, Eric, and for those that may not know on the call, I think everybody knows Eric and I are really good friends. I mean, Eric is a part of my inner circle. Eric and I bounce things off each other daily, and Eric keeps me accountable, and thank goodness for that. And I appreciate that very much. So, but Eric and I had a conversation a few weeks ago, and it comes into one of the values of called fear.
Mhm.
We as leaders, we have to embrace fear. We have to embrace failure in the right ways. And Eric, tell us about that value, because in part of our conversation, you mentioned, hey, that's like number one for me
Yeah.
is fear.
Yeah, Phil, when until we talked about that, I never really thought about it in the way that you asked me. And fear to me is one of those things that I have to face every day. And thinking about that, everybody on the call, we've all been on emergency calls, and just think about a time that you responded to a situation, and maybe it was someone that was going through a rough time and made a bad decision, maybe with alcohol, maybe with drugs, and you saw them at their worst and you're talking with them. And for me, Phil, that always resonated because I realized that they're no different than me. Literally, I am one single decision away from a train wreck in my life. And that is what drives me, is because I don't want to be so comfortable where I take what I have for granted. I don't want to take my position for granted because I realize that I can screw it up. I can do one thing that screws my marriage up. I can do one thing that screws the opportunities that we have to, work on this leadership project. I'm one decision away from messing up the great friend relationships. And that fear, Phil, I think drives me to be able to realize that when I look at myself in the mirror, that I'm not that good. I need people around me to make me better, to hold me accountable. And this was a very tough statement, but in one of John Maxwell's books, when we was talking about leading yourself, he said this statement, and it's almost offensive, but it's true, is he says, you can never trust yourself. Never
Mhm.
be in a position where you think you're that good, where you're not going to make a mistake. And Phil, I realize that I am literally an inch away from a friggin' train wreck and disaster in my life and my leadership journey. So that healthy fear just drives me to continue to push and to lead myself well every single day. So that's sort of a glimpse of what fear does for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember you telling me that, and that just kind of hit home for me as well. Sometimes we need that reminder. But values, having good values in itself is super important as being a leader. Sometimes we can put ourselves in a room, as we talk about our inner circle and accountability of folks who are leaders. As we talk about in our leadership class, that leadership is influence. That's good, bad, somewhere in between. And so you can put yourself in a room of, what we call, quote, leaders that are bad leaders that have terrible values.
Yeah.
So you got to remain fear, you got to remain on target and kind of and know what's good and what's bad. If we as leaders, if we want to change the world, we can't just climb the ladder of success. We got to climb this ladder of good values.
Yeah.
That's it comes down to that. And I love what you said about the fear, because that right there for most of us resonates. It does for me. It absolutely does for me. And I got to tell you, after I had that conversation, it changed for me. I was like, gosh, never thought about fear that way. But that's really important. So, Eric, as we're moving on, and gosh, this call is coming to a close very end. If anybody has questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. What are some things that we can talk about values, the importance of, what are some important of these values, and what are some things that we as leaders can do to maintain good values?
Yeah, I think, Phil, for everybody on the call, and even for us, I think we need to do this frequently. One, you have to know what your values are and why. And you can do an internet search, and we do it in our leadership class. But if you do an internet search, there's a form, any of them you can print out. It's got like 100 values on it. And go through there and really identify why you have a value of a certain thing. And that's a good thing. So one, I think you need to identify what drives you, what makes you. And when you get clear on those, then I would really think about, why is this particular one a value? For me, integrity was one. And I describe it in detail in the book, because there's another part of that actually caused some trouble for me. But when I know what they are and I'm confident, that builds confidence. When you realize that a value, where's the line in the sand for you, is knowing that. I think it helps you understand what makes you up, what drives you, what type of work do you love. But in addition to that, Phil, when you know what your values are, it will allow you to appreciate what someone else's values are. So mine are different than yours, but because I'm confident in who I am, I really appreciate what your values are, and I can see how important they are. So it can transform relationships completely. As an example, Lee's on this call. He's kind of the producer of so many things, and Jason's on here, and we have a group of people. But Lee and I have worked together for a long, long time. And I wish I would have done this exercise with him years ago, because he adds so much value to what we do, but he's different than me. And it's a beautiful relationship when we understand and appreciate the values of people. So I encourage everybody to do the values exercise and do it with those closest to you, because I do think it has the potential to completely transform relationships and decrease conflict, by the way, which is a leadership challenge that we all face.
Yeah, that's spot on. So let's go back to leading ourselves well. The hardest person is, and the most important person is ourselves. And we talked about self-limiting beliefs and confidence, self-confidence. People, unfortunately, we as people, we don't rise to the level of our beliefs. Sometimes we rise to the level of what we feel like our self-worth is.
Yeah.
And, Eric, that can be an extreme. We can be self-sabotage, like we talked about a few minutes ago. Oh, I'm not worthy. People will judge me. I can't do this. Finger pointing. They'll cut my legs out from under me. Every day will be a disaster. Or I could be, hey, I'm Mr. Ego and I am Superman and I know it all and you can't tell me anything. And, you can be just extreme there. You can be self-sabotage, or you can be Mr. Ego. And
Yeah.
certainly, neither one of those are where we want to be. So, Eric, are there some things that you can give us that says, hey, these are some things that will help you to lead yourself well. You being the most important person, these are some things that will help you to lead yourself well.
Yeah, Phil, I think there's so many of them. And for the participants, I really think they need to explore what are the challenges really to prevent them from leading themselves, whatever it is. But for me, and I had wrote down a couple of things. It really starts with a question. that I think's the foundation is what is it like on the other side of you? What is it like on the other side of me? And sometimes ego gets in the way where we're like, oh, great, we're well accomplished. And the next thing you know, you're on an island by yourself because nobody wants to be on the island with you. I know I've been there during my career. So starting with that, what's it like on the other side of you? Ego is very challenging, but get feedback from people that you trust, that you can openly say, would you please help me understand how I responded in this situation? And then you can specifically look at different things. So in your career, right, you're not going to maybe open-ended question and say, what's it like on the other side of me, Phil? And you're like, well, what are you talking about? You can be more specific than that. So that's really one thing that I think. You can even get a personal level, like look at your financial statements, look at your relationships with your family, with your significant other, and maybe even ask that, what's it like on the other side of me? And losing the ego. And really that creates an attitude of improvement. The next thing is you got to be humble. Like we truly have a gift to be able to do what we do and use that gift carefully, kind of like a double-edged sword. Not everybody can do it. Sometimes we think everybody can do it, but being humble is so, so important. It's a whole lot better for somebody to edify you than it is for you to talk about yourself. Just think about when somebody comes in the room and all they do is talk about themselves. You're like, whoa, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But if somebody lifts them up and they talk about it, it's fine. You're going to get your time to be in front. You're going to get your time to be able to follow as a leader, lead. You're going to follow. So ego is a big thing. Be humble. You develop in yourself like you're doing with these calls and podcasts and books and, be accountable to yourself and your inner circle. So those are just some things of mine. There's many, many more. But the bottom line is just do something to get better. And that's what we're trying to do. And I love this. I love this format and what we're doing, by the way.
Yeah, good stuff. We got some questions actually in the chat. Before we get to those, just kind of, reiterating what you said here, ego is the biggest killer. And we definitely want to keep ourselves in balance there. I would just encourage us all to, like Eric said, remain humble, surround ourselves with people who will tell us the truth and not people who would just say, oh, you're doing great. But people who will say, no, no, you're not. And that's what we need. We need that as leaders. If every leader in this country had someone that told them the truth, it might be different. Okay. Definitely surround yourself with those accountability partners. So let me kind of look here, get the chat going, because I know we've had several questions to pop up in our chat, and we want to try to have time to answer a few of those. So we have a question here, Eric, and we have some more things to add before we close out here. But let's go ahead and go to this question. What was something that pushed you through some self-limiting beliefs to step up as a leader? What was something? Yeah, there you go.
I love that question. And thanks for whoever asked that. I can tell you from me, Phil, is that um, the most important thing that I ever did about the self-limiting beliefs was I didn't realize it at the point, but it was uh, to to get involved in personal growth and reading different books. That to me allowed me to get confidence because it caused me to think differently. So if you struggle with that, which we all do, if you have a habit that consistently, and I use the Audible app, I download one book per month. And I don't just listen to it once. There's a lot of times where I listen to it multiple times. But I think that is the number one thing that I used to help my self-limiting beliefs because I was learning more, I was gaining more confidence. And by the way, most people around me were not doing that. They were using their past experiences to think that was enough. But when you invest and you're doing the mentor calls and the leadership class and the podcast, in a variety of different things, it builds confidence because you're learning and you're growing. And for me, that was the beginning. When no one else, I didn't have any mentors or any friends. When I started doing that, things started to change for me. But it took a couple years of investing. But that was the number one thing, and that created momentum. To kind of, continue to build and stack. And it was like a snowball. Once that snowball started rolling, then the next thing you know, it's picked up and it made it a lot easier. But that's a great question. Yeah, great question.
Yeah, and sometimes kind of adding on to that, Eric, that's a really good question and a really good response is, we as leaders sometimes we have blinders and we going back to this accountability. We need people to tell us, "Hey, take your blinders off. You're not seeing this correctly." All
Yeah.
right. Or, we also need people, we also need leaders who want to invest in other leaders and value other leaders because, we're not going to be doing this forever, right? No matter what industry is. Someone said, well, it's about EMS leadership. No, it's not. We're talking about leadership because it doesn't matter what industry you're in, leadership is leadership. There could be some specifics in every area, but what we're talking about is leadership. So we don't need to be leaders who say, well, I want to keep this all to myself. I want to invest in others. And sometimes that's a self-limiting belief right there. Kind of goes into the ego thing, right? So another point here, someone put in the chat here is 10 words every leader should live by. If it is to be, it must come from me. That's pretty interesting. I like that. I like that a lot. Let's see if any more questions here before we move
I
on.
see one that popped up, Phil.
Yeah, how do you turn yourself around when you start to feeling tired and not having worth? Oh my goodness. Gosh, I'm gonna let you're the guest, Eric. I could answer that, but you're the guest. Let's hear from you.
Yeah. Well, that is I think because I know we only got like 2 minutes. I think the persona for leaders and successful leaders that we put that on is that they never have bad days and they never get tired. That is completely false. Like I think one, it's okay to be tired, and what is I think that's an indication from our body to say, hey, you need to slow down. I think prioritization, I think getting the proper rest, but when you're tired, you definitely got to rest because you can't take care of yourself functioning on coffee and no rest. So um, you have to take care of yourself. This goes back to, leading yourself. The most important thing is you got to get the proper rest. You got to be strong before you can take care of anything else. This not having worth, I think, is a struggle and insecurities for me as well. But starting with yourself, being able to read, being able to learn from others, picking up the phone and, having a mentor or having a call from somebody to say, if you ever struggle with that, and you're going to be surprised that most of us have struggled with every struggles that everybody has had. We just are not vulnerable enough to say it. So, just hang in there, take care of yourself, eat right, get the proper rest, and invest in yourself. And I think those are the key ingredients to at least move the needle.
Yeah, good stuff. So I want to leave everybody with 5 tips. If you didn't get anything from this call, maybe this will help you take away at least 5 tips. Good call, good information. But 5 tips to leading yourself well with everything we talked about. Number one, seek spiritual nourishment and reflect daily. And it really goes along with this question that was just asked. These 5 tips to seek spiritual nourishment and reflect daily. And number two, surround yourself with folks you love daily. You want to be around people that you want to be around that love you and you love them and you can add value to them. The third thing is have an inner circle that challenges you and holds you accountable. That is so important right there to keep us out of that ego or sabotage. And the fourth thing is maintain your physical health. It's important that we take care of ourselves physically. And then the fifth thing is promote mental growth. It's definitely important that we take care of ourselves physically, mentally. We have those accountability partners. We surround ourselves with people that we love so that we have a good environment for those days that we need a pick-me-up. And then we also reflect spiritually and also on things that we've learned. Eric, we're out of time. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you. And everybody, have a blessed Friday and a wonderful weekend.